The night sky above Earth appeared ordinary, a canvas of stars, serene and unchanging, until the Vor'kal Dominion arrived. The first sign was a faint shimmer, like a heat wave rippling through the upper atmosphere, followed by the slow emergence of massive shadows, their forms blotting out the stars. The Vor'kal fleet slipped into orbit, its ships enormous, with hulls as black as void, absorbing light, giving them a predatory silhouette. Each warship was a fortress, bristling with weapons, energy cannons, and gravity disruptors, their designs angular, sharp, as if the ships themselves were blades ready to cut through the planet below. From Earth's surface, the sky darkened, a total eclipse, as the warships settled into formation. Their engines emitted no sound, but the air grew heavy, an electromagnetic pressure that made radios crackle, phones die, and televisions flicker. Electricity grids shuddered, and satellite signals fell silent, as if the world had suddenly been draped in a veil of static. On the Vor'kal flagship, the bridge gleamed with alien technology. Screens displayed Earth, its continents illuminated, the blue ocean swirling, a jewel of life in the darkness of space. At the center of the bridge, Commander Xal'rath stood, a tall figure, its skin a shimmering silver, eyes a solid black, reflecting no emotion. It wore armor woven with energy fields, shifting colors that matched its surroundings, giving it an ethereal presence. "Activate broad-spectrum communications," Xal'rath commanded, its voice a hum, translated through machinery, soft and unsettling, like a whisper directly into the mind. The ship's AI complied, and Earth's networks lit up, broadcast signals hijacked. Every screen, device, and radio turned to a single feed, showing the Vor'kal symbol, a spiral of thorns pulsing with a dull red light. The message began, a series of clicks, tones, and alien words, their intonation harsh, demanding, but to human ears, they were nonsense, threats veiled in obscurity. Across the planet, confusion reigned. In control rooms, military bases, and news studios, experts struggled to decode the transmission, but it was clear from the tone. Whoever had sent this message did not consider a response necessary. The aliens weren't communicating, they were dictating. The first strike was surgical. Beams of light shot from the warships, thin, but where they touched, cities crumbled. Communication towers melted, satellites exploded, and power grids failed. The internet collapsed, phone lines went dead, and military channels filled with static. In an instant, Earth was cut off, isolated, and blind. The Vor'kal commanders watched the chaos unfold, their screens filled with images of confusion, vehicles crashing, people running, cities darkening as the night swallowed them whole. "The primitives are lost," Xal'rath observed, its mandibles clicking, a sign of amusement. "Deploy the ground units. Begin population control. No need for negotiations." Pods launched from the warships, falling like meteors, their shells breaking apart upon re-entry, revealing sleek exosuits, warriors armed with plasma weapons. They landed in major cities, unopposed, their movements swift, precise, like surgeons approaching a sedated patient. In New York, Beijing, Paris, and Tokyo, the alien soldiers moved through the streets, their helmets reflecting fractured images of the terrified humans who watched from windows, their steps leaving scorch marks on the pavement. The Vor'kal strategy was simple: show strength, instill fear, break the will of the population, and herd survivors into designated zones for processing. They had done this before on dozens of worlds and never had it failed. But as the soldiers advanced, the first signs of resistance appeared. A stone throne, a Molotov cocktail shattering, a makeshift barricade of cars and debris. The humans fought back, not with sophistication, but with desperation, a raw defiance that the Vor'kal had not anticipated. Back on the flagship, Xal'rath's expression shifted, a subtle change, but significant. "Increase intimidation protocols," it ordered. "These creatures do not understand their place. Show them. Teach them." The warships hummed, their weapons recharging, the sky flickering with preparation. But as the next wave of strikes prepared, the human forces below began to organize, radioing each other, using old frequencies, rallying in pockets of resistance. The Vor'kal had come to claim a world, but in that moment, the first seeds of war were planted, and Earth's defenders, scattered and unprepared, began to realize that they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove that humanity was not inferior, and that the true war had only just begun. The Vor'kal ground assault began with a symphony of fire and light. As their drop pods descended, cracking the skies over New York, Beijing, Paris, and Tokyo, the streets below trembled, and the air itself seemed to warp, bending under the weight of the alien invasion. In New York, the skyline glowed, not from the city's lights, but from the Vor'kal plasma engines, which hummed with an eerie resonance. Their pods hit the ground, metal petals opening, and armored figures emerged, each soldier encased in a black exosuit that shifted colors, blending with the urban backdrop. The suits hissed, releasing steam, and the alien troops moved, their steps synchronized, weapons primed. The initial human response came in the form of bullets, barricades, and panic. Police units, National Guards, and military forces mobilized, their vehicles rolling into the streets, soldiers taking positions behind abandoned cars and makeshift barriers. Rifles barked and machine guns rattled, but the bullets flattened against Vor'kal energy shields, sparks raining down as if the aliens wore the night sky as armor. A column of tanks moved up Fifth Avenue, their barrels turning, cannons firing, but the Vor'kal soldiers responded without hesitation. Their plasma rifles hummed, blue bolts of energy streaking through the air, and as the first tank ignited, its metal shell melting, the human lines wavered. In Beijing, mech stomped through the streets, human-made war machines, but they were slow, mechanical beasts compared to the fluid movement of the Vor'kal exosuits. The aliens danced between gunfire, their weapons precise, targeting joints, power sources, and the machines crumbled, smoke rising over the ancient rooftops as the city fell silent, punctuated only by the hum of energy weapons. Paris fared no better. The Eiffel Tower stood tall, a symbol of resistance, but the Vor'kal commanders did not care for symbols. They fired at its base, the structure groaning, metal twisting, until it collapsed, a shower of debris that choked the streets. Civilians fled, mothers holding children, elderly dragged by neighbors. But the aliens moved methodically, their suits scanning for heat signatures, and the streets became a grid, humans reduced to blips on a map. In Tokyo, the neon lights flickered, advertisements twisted, showing Vor'kal symbols. As the aliens hijacked local broadcasts, their message clear, though indecipherable. The streets flooded with people, but the Vor'kal deployed drones, small spheres that rolled and sprayed mist, a sedative gas that silenced entire districts. When the smoke cleared, the aliens walked among the still bodies, tagging individuals, loading them into transport pods, their movements detached, as if harvesting crops. As the human forces reeled, the Vor'kal established control zones. They erected force fields, blue domes of energy that sealed neighborhoods, cutting off supplies and blocking escape routes. The prisoners were taken to biological research pods, their minds scanned, their bodies analyzed, as the aliens sought to understand the limits of human physiology, mapping weaknesses, and cataloging traits for future exploitation. Amidst the chaos, small groups of soldiers began to improvise. In New York, a squadron of Marines used the sewer systems, popping up behind enemy lines, throwing Molotov cocktails and setting ambushes. Their bullets couldn't pierce shields, but their environmental traps worked. Alleyways collapsed, vehicles exploded, and the aliens began to fall, not to weapons, but to the city itself, as human ingenuity turned the landscape against them. In Beijing, urban fighters used rooftops, dropping rubble, disabling exosuits with simple tools, jamming sensors with spray paint, and confusing the Vor'kal's advanced targeting systems. The streets became mazes, every shadow a potential threat, and the alien lines broke, confusion spreading through their ranks. Parisian rebels used smoke bombs, mirrors, and sound devices, creating illusions, phantom soldiers, and ghost voices that led patrols into traps. They used the catacombs, tunnels that the alien scanners could not penetrate, and snipers emerged, striking from shadows, then vanishing into hidden pathways. In Tokyo, engineers repurposed drones, hacking into the alien network, spreading false data, and creating decoys. The Vor'kal saw armies where there were none, buildings shifted on their maps, and entire squads were led into dead ends, where the resistance waited, turning abandoned structures into fortresses. The first strike had been brutal, the human response fragmented, but as the day turned to night and the cities burned, a new rhythm emerged. It was improvised, unpredictable, a melody of chaos, but it was human, and for the first time, the Vor'kal soldiers hesitated, their sensors showing shadows, their HUDs glitching, and their commanders struggling to adapt. The humans were no longer running. They were fighting, and somewhere deep within the Vor'kal ranks, a spark of fear ignited, a whisper that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated this world and its people. The war had begun, and it was no longer an invasion. It was a battle for survival, and Earth's defenders were just getting started. The initial chaos of the invasion had given way to a tense calm, as the survivors of Earth found refuge in the places untouched by war. The rural landscapes, forests, and mountainous regions became havens, where humanity began to regroup, their spirits unbroken, even as the skies remained shrouded by the alien fleet. In an abandoned military bunker nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains, a coalition formed. The leadership room was a makeshift command center, its walls lined with maps, blueprints, and screens showing flickering feeds from surveillance drones. General Harper, a veteran of countless battles, stood at the center of the room, her brow furrowed, her hands clutching a tablet that displayed the latest satellite images. Around her, a mix of military personnel, scientists, engineers, and civilians listened intently, their faces hardened, but their eyes bright with determination. "We can't match them strength for strength," Harper said, her voice steady, each word a foundation stone. "But every advanced weapon has a weakness. We need to find it, exploit it, turn their technology against them." The scientists had gathered samples of Vor'kal technology, scavenged from battle sites, and retrieved from fallen soldiers. The alien exosuits, energy weapons, and drones were spread across workbenches, their components exposed as engineers dissected them with tools crafted from spare parts. Dr. Xal'rath, a quantum physicist, held up a small device, a fragment of a Vor'kal shield generator. The device pulsed with blue light, its surface smooth, but beneath the casing, intricate circuits danced, responding to human touch. "The shield technology uses a frequency modulation system," she explained, her voice a mixture of excitement and urgency. "If we can create an electromagnetic pulse at the right frequency, we could disrupt it. It wouldn't destroy them, but would make them vulnerable." The engineers got to work, repurposing old generators, rewiring communication devices, and crafting EMP bombs from household electronics, scrap metal, and alien tech. The hacking teams, led by former cybercriminals and government analysts, infiltrated the Vor'kal networks, mapping their communication channels and identifying weak points. In the field, the first test began. A small guerrilla unit, operating from a forest encampment, used a makeshift EMP device to ambush a patrol. As the aliens advanced, their shields active, the device activated, pulsing with energy, and the shields flickered, their blue glow sputtering, leaving the soldiers exposed. The humans struck fast, crossbows, knives, and silent weapons proving lethal against unarmored enemies. They dragged the bodies away, stripping them of gear, and left no trace of the attack, a ghost strike that the Vor'kal commanders could not explain. These small victories multiplied. In Paris, rebels sabotaged an energy tower, plunging a control zone into darkness and freeing hundreds of prisoners. In Tokyo, hackers overrode drone protocols, turning the machines against their operators, cutting off supply lines and creating confusion among alien ranks. The Vor'kal command network began to fracture. Their maps showed ghost signals. Their sensors detected movement, but nothing appeared. The humans became shadows, whispers in the dark, their attacks unpredictable, their strategy adaptable. On the Vor'kal flagship, Commander Xal'rath stood before a holographic display. The map of Earth shifting, zones marked as secure, now flashing red, indicating breaches, loss of control, and unexplained sabotage. How are they doing this? Xal'rath demanded, its mandibles clicking, a sign of agitation. The advisors remained silent, their eyes lowered, as feeds showed soldiers hesitating, shields malfunctioning, and technology responding to unknown commands. They are primitives. Xal'rath's voice rose, sharp and grating. Their weapons are metal and fire. Their vehicles run on fossil fuels. They cannot outthink us. But the truth was clear. The Vor'kal had brought the future to Earth, but the humans had turned the past into a weapon. They used history, guerrilla tactics, and psychological warfare, pitting unpredictability against precision and fear against technology. As the night drew on and the world turned, the alien invaders began to understand what humanity had known all along. That true strength was not in superior weapons, but in the will to fight, the ability to adapt, and the refusal to surrender, no matter the odds. The turning point had come, and for the first time, the Vor'kal Dominion, with all its arrogance and power, felt the cold touch of doubt as Earth's defenders rose from the shadows, ready to take back their world, one battle at a time. The resistance did not rise with a battle cry, but with whispers, quiet steps, and clever hands that turned the ordinary into extraordinary weapons. As the Vor'kal tightened their grip on major cities, the streets became battlegrounds, but not in the way they expected. The warfare was not fought with plasma rifles and hover tanks, but with tools from workshops, kitchen supplies, and the raw ingenuity of everyday people. In the farmlands of Iowa, tractors were retrofitted with metal spikes, their plows converted into battering rams. Farmers, who had once tended crops, now dug trenches, their fields riddled with traps. A simple harvester became a weapon, its blades sharpened, and baited paths led alien patrols into clearing machines, where blades whirred, and Vor'kal troops vanished in clouds of debris. In the skyscrapers of Tokyo, hackers operated from the remnants of internet cafes, their laptops patched together, circuit boards exposed, wires weaving through old modems. They broke into Vor'kal communication networks, broadcasting false orders, leading patrols in circles, and shutting down drones mid-flight. Screens across the city displayed human resistance symbols. Graffiti spread messages of hope, and the Vor'kal propaganda broadcasts were overridden by videos of small victories, showing that the aliens could bleed and they could be beaten. In the forests of Eastern Europe, medics and scientists worked together, developing antidotes to alien poisons. They used herbs, natural remedies, and old-world knowledge, curing those who had been exposed to alien gas weapons. Field hospitals emerged in caves, abandoned barns, and beneath the canopies of ancient trees, where wounded soldiers and civilians alike were treated and sent back to the front lines. Even children had roles. They became scouts, sneaking through narrow passages, carrying messages where radios could not reach. They moved with an innocence, their small frames unseen, as they gathered intelligence, mapping alien movements and reporting back to the hidden bunkers. The resistance wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. Artists painted murals, writers crafted stories, and musicians played tunes that spread through the underground networks, keeping spirits high and reminding humanity that they were still free, still alive, and still fighting. The Vor'kal soldiers, trained for conventional warfare, struggled with the unpredictable tactics of the humans. They understood battle lines, but not ambushes in alleyways. Their sensors detected heat, but not the cold resolve of an enemy that could blend into the shadows, vanish into crowds, and strike when least expected. In Paris, the resistance used mirrors, reflecting light to create illusions, leading patrols into dead ends, where hidden fighters struck, stripping weapons and evaporating into the maze of historic streets. In New York, subway tunnels became battlegrounds, flooded intentionally, forcing the Vor'kal to wade through water, where electrical traps awaited, short-circuiting their suits and leaving them vulnerable to handcrafted weapons. The resistance leaders used misinformation as a weapon. They broadcast false retreats, leaked fake plans, and set traps where the aliens expected easy victories. They hid their true numbers, masking their strength, and appearing in places they shouldn't have been. For the Vor'kal, the war became surreal. They dreamed of humans, saw shadows where none should be, and heard voices in the silence of night. Their advanced technology became useless in the face of primal warfare, where mudslides, pitfalls, and firebombs became tools of war. In the hidden bases, generators hummed, 3D printers created weapons, and inventors crafted gadgets that merged human resourcefulness with alien technology. Hacked drones flew over alien camps, dropping smoke bombs and blaring sirens, creating chaos, while resistance fighters moved in, grabbing supplies, and disappearing before dawn. The resistance did not look like an army. There were no uniforms, no ranks, but every person had a role, and every role mattered. The elderly prepared food, mechanics fixed vehicles, and children painted rocks with symbols of hope, placing them on paths where fighters would find them, a silent reminder that they were not alone. The Vor'kal's confidence waned, their communications filled with confusion, as reports of human victories came from all over the planet. They could not adapt, could not understand how inferior beings had become the hunters, and why their technology failed against the human spirit. And as the resistance grew, the whispers of rebellion turned into a roar, and Earth itself seemed to rise, pushing back, reclaiming its cities, forests, and lands. The war was no longer a question of if humanity would survive, but when the Vor'kal would realize they had lost control, and the humans they had called inferior were, in fact, their worst nightmare. As the war raged on, the resistance evolved, shedding the skin of conventional warfare and embracing the shadows. They became whispers, ghosts in the twilight, moving unseen, striking without warning, and leaving no trace. The Vor'kal had superior technology, but humans held the darkness, and they wielded it like a weapon. In the abandoned streets of London, the resistance activated speakers, hidden in sewers, behind broken windows, and within crumbling walls. At random intervals, the speakers emitted sounds, children laughing, footsteps echoing, soft whispers, and the clicking of human tongues, a sound alien to Vor'kal ears. Vor'kal patrols moved cautiously, their weapons raised, but the sounds circled them, creating illusions of movement, and their advanced sensors showed nothing. The shadows seemed alive, buildings loomed, and the streets twisted as the humans manipulated light and sound, turning reality into a nightmare. In the underground tunnels of Moscow, trapdoors were rigged, leading to dark pits filled with sharp metal, broken glass, and chemical traps that emitted smoke, blurring vision and disorienting the invaders. Tripwires set off explosions, but not deadly blasts. Rather flashbangs, strobe lights, and sonic pulses, breaking the rhythm of the Vor'kal's movement, throwing them into chaos. The resistance fighters moved through these tunnels, their faces painted, skin smeared with mud, eyes hidden behind goggles, and mouths covered to silence their breathing. They emerged from shadows, attacked swiftly, and vanished, leaving the Vor'kal to fire blindly, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions. The psychological warfare deepened. In cities like Cairo, the resistance projected holograms, showing human figures walking through streets, children playing, and families staring blankly at alien patrols. When the Vor'kal approached, the images flickered, turning into ash and drifting away, triggering sensors, but leaving nothing real to engage. General Harper, the commander of the invasion, sat in his war room, surrounded by screens, each showing chaos. His mandibles clicked, a nervous tick, as reports came in of soldiers firing at nothing, patrols lost, and entire squads failing to respond. They're using their own planet against us, he hissed, his voice sharp, grating against the ears of his advisors. Humans do not fight in the open. They're not soldiers. They are predators. The Vor'kal soldiers began to see humans as monsters, their technology betraying them, showing false readings and overlaying their vision with hallucinations. Drones displayed human forms, but when fired upon, the bullets passed through, striking nothing. Sensors beeped, showing heat signatures, but when approached, the buildings were empty, the streets quiet, as if the humans had become part of the landscape itself. In the forests of Brazil, resistance fighters used animals, releasing birds and mammals into battle zones, triggering motion sensors, and confusing the Vor'kal's targeting systems. The aliens fired into bushes, set traps for ghosts, and walked into ambushes as the humans struck from above, below, and all sides, their attacks swift and brutal. The power dynamic shifted. Where the Vor'kal once patrolled boldly, they now moved in groups, their helmets swiveling, their weapons drawn, but their movements slow, cautious, as if they expected death in every shadow. In New York, the subways echoed with recorded screams, the walls painted with phosphorescent symbols, illuminating when lights hit them, creating images of human faces, eyes wide, mouths open, as if the city itself was alive and watching them. General Xal'rath's orders became erratic, his decisions questioned, as morale plummeted. His soldiers whispered of haunted cities, invisible killers, and the unyielding presence of human will. The alien commanders argued, their voices rising as discipline eroded and the Vor'kal lines began to crumble, not from firepower, but from fear. For the resistance, the shadows became allies, the darkness a shield, and they moved as if born from it, appearing only to strike, and then fading into the void. The humans no longer fought for survival. They hunted, and the Vor'kal, once the apex predators, became the prey. The Battle of Shadows was not about bodies and bullets, but about minds and memories, and as the Vor'kal soldiers dreamt of human shapes and woke to silence, they began to realize that Earth itself had become a weapon, and the war they thought they could win had already turned against them. The Vor'kal mothership, once a symbol of dominance, now floated uneasily in Earth's orbit, its gleaming black hull surrounded by a halo of static. The once stable energy fields that shimmered around it now flickered as Earth's natural magnetosphere interfered with alien technology, short-circuiting systems, and scrambling communications. Inside the command center, the holographic displays projected a chaotic tableau. Red alerts flashed, maps of Earth distorted, and sensors displayed phantom readings, marking enemy forces where none existed. The Vor'kal commanders, clad in exoskeletal armor, clicked their mandibles, their voices sharp, but their confidence eroded. General Xal'rath sat at the center of the room, his throne-like chair surrounded by monitors, each showing fragments of a war unraveling. His mandibles twitched, his black eyes reflected the flickering screens, and his claws tapped rhythmically against the control panel, an unconscious sign of agitation. "The humans are not fighting us directly," he growled, his voice low, a rumble that sent a shiver through the room. "They use the planet itself. The storms disrupt our signals. The soil interferes with our sensors. Even their cities seem to shift." Admiral Vor'kal spoke, his tone cautious. "We must consider withdrawal. Our casualties increase daily. Our supplies are disrupted. The resistance has turned our own drones against us." Withdrawal. Xal'rath's mandibles clicked, the sound like bones snapping. "Do you suggest we crawl back to the Dominion with tales of ghosts and primitives? Shall we tell the High Council that the most advanced fleet in the galaxy was outwitted by farmers and children?" The commanders fell silent, their armor dimming, the bioluminescent patterns that reflected their status now muted, as if the ship itself shared their shame. But not all voices called for retreat. Commander Xal'rath, known for his ruthlessness, stepped forward, his armor pulsing red, a sign of aggression. "We should strike harder," he said. "Scorch the earth, burn their forests, drain their seas. Let the planet itself become an example to any who dare resist us. Fool! Vor'kal hissed, his tentacles curling. You've seen the reports. Our flamethrowers misfire. Our energy weapons overheat. The humans manipulate the environment. They lead us into traps. They use our own technology against us. The room descended into chaos, voices overlapping, as tactical displays glitched, showing Earth rotating too fast, buildings growing and shrinking, human faces morphing into shadows. The Vor'kal technology, once a beacon of stability, now became a tool of madness, echoing human broadcasts, flashing images of human eyes, unblinking, staring through the screens, as if the resistance itself had invaded the ship. Amidst the turmoil, a new message crackled through the speakers, its frequency jarring, a mix of human language and Vor'kal codes. "We are inside," it whispered. "Your ship is ours. Your minds are open. You will never leave." The commanders froze, their screens filled with static, and shapes moved within the white noise, shadows that twisted and reformed, human silhouettes blending into alien forms, until the line between reality and illusion blurred. General Harper's vision swam. His own reflection stared back, but with human eyes, and when he blinked, he was no longer on the ship. He stood in a field of tall grass, the sky wide and blue, and children played, their laughter soft, but when they turned, their faces melted, eyes hollow, and the sky darkened, thunder rumbled, and the grass became ash, blowing away to reveal charred bones beneath his feet. He awoke with a gasp, his armor constricting, and Vor'kal shook him, mandibles clattering in panic. "General, the humans have breached the lower decks. They are targeting the energy core." The resistance had used the chaos. While the commanders argued, human saboteurs, led by elite operatives, had boarded the ship, using Vor'kal technology to cloak their presence, moving through maintenance tunnels and disabling security systems. They reached the energy core, a massive sphere of pulsing light, surrounded by columns of raw energy, and they set charges, wires snaking through the machinery as lights blinked red and alarms wailed. "Seal the decks. Flood them with gas." Xal'rath commanded, but nothing happened. The screens showed false data, doors opened to empty space, and maps twisted, leading soldiers away from the breach. The resistance forces activated the detonator, and the energy core exploded, not with fire, but with a pulse of pure electromagnetic force, short-circuiting systems, plunging the ship into darkness, and reversing the gravity fields, sending alien soldiers tumbling through corridors, weapons slipping from claws as shadows moved among them, human forms appearing and vanishing. In the command center, the holographic displays died. Only the emergency lights remained, casting long shadows, and General Xal'rath saw shapes moving, eyes blinking, and heard the whispers of his own soldiers, muttering of shadows, of ghosts, and the slow, encroaching realization that the war was no longer physical, but had invaded their minds. The resistance had not only broken through the alien defenses, they had entered the ship, turning the hunters into the hunted, and within the Vor'kal ranks, the first seeds of surrender began to take root, as the greatest fleet in the galaxy realized they were trapped, not by walls, but by their own fear. The final battle for Earth began not with a declaration, but with a signal, a pulse sent through the airwaves, triggering devices and activating codes. Across the planet, human resistance cells, militaries, and civilians received the message. A single word displayed on every screen, flashed through light signals, and whispered over radios. Now, in New York, the skyline lit up, not from alien plasma, but from homemade rockets, EMP bombs, and fireworks launched as distractions. Resistance fighters, dressed in camouflaged rags, stormed checkpoints, overwhelming alien patrols with brute force and simple weapons. Children and elders followed, disabling machines and painting walls with symbols of human victory. In Tokyo, hackers unleashed viruses, shutting down alien surveillance, creating blind spots, and leading Vor'kal soldiers into traps. Drones hijacked by human engineers flew erratic patterns, blaring human music and broadcasting false coordinates, splitting enemy forces and isolating their strongest units. The mothership, once an imposing force, now struggled to maintain control. Its hull shimmered, energy shields pulsed, and the weapon systems flickered as human infiltrators moved through its lower decks, sabotaging systems and setting charges at key points. The Resistance had repurposed alien technology, cloaking themselves and masking their signatures, appearing as Vor'kal soldiers to the ship's security systems, moving freely and spreading chaos. In the command center, General Xal'rath stood among shattered screens, his officers dead, fallen by their own hands, as the humans' psychological warfare had turned minds into battlefields. He alone remained, his armor cracked, his eyes bloodshot, as the ship trembled, lights dimmed, and shadows danced at the edges of his vision. "This is not possible," he whispered, his mandibles clicking, his breath ragged. "We are the Vor'kal. We are conquerors." But the screens showed the truth. Human forces surged, cities were reclaimed, and Vor'kal strongholds burned. The mothership's sensors displayed thousands of signals, too many to track, as if the entire planet had risen against them. And in the confusion, reality blurred, human faces appeared in every shadow, and human voices filled every silence. The Resistance fighters reached the core. Their leader, Captain Xal'rath, stood before the energy sphere, her face lit by its pale light as she connected wires and set the detonator, her expression calm, as if she were simply turning off a light. "Earth to Vor'kal fleet." She spoke into the ship's communication system, her voice transmitted to every remaining vessel. "This is not your world. This is not your story. Leave now, or become part of our history." The explosion rippled through the mothership, not with fire, but with pure energy, a pulse that shut down systems, killed gravity, and shattered shields. The Vor'kal fleet, once invincible, became vulnerable, and the human military, with reclaimed jets, missiles, and old-world weapons, struck hard, blasting ships and sending debris raining down into the atmosphere. On the ground, Vor'kal soldiers, cut off from command, surrendered, their weapons dropped as humans surrounded them, binding them and escorting them to makeshift holding areas, where medical teams tended to injuries and civilians offered water, not as victors but as survivors, showing the strength of mercy even in triumph. As the mothership began to fall, General Xal'rath crawled to the central console, his hands shaking as he sent a final transmission to his homeworld. His voice trembled, a whisper of fear, as he spoke into the void. "Do not come here. Do not seek this planet. The humans, they are not prey. They are hunters. The galaxy should fear them." The signal cut off, and the mothership broke apart, its fragments burning through the sky, illuminating the dawn, as humanity watched, not with celebration, but with relief, as the long night ended and Earth stood free. The world began to rebuild, but stories spread of how the humans had turned shadows into weapons, how the invaders had fallen, not to machines, but to mind and will, and how the greatest fleet in the galaxy had been defeated, not by guns, but by a species they had called Inferior. And in the quiet, as the planet healed, the humans remembered that the greatest wars were not won in battles, but in the hearts of those who refused to surrender, and that true power lay not in technology, but in the unbreakable spirit of a world united by hope.